These 9 everyday foods could be silently feeding cancer cells and putting your health at serious risk. Cutting them out may be one of the most powerful steps you take for longevity. Stay until the end. The last one is the most shocking and overlooked of all. Let's take a moment to truly understand why this concept of an acidic versus an alkaline body is so critically important. Think of your body as a finely tuned instrument, where every system is designed to work in perfect harmony. For this harmony to exist, your body must maintain a delicate balance in its internal pH, particularly in your blood, which should always be slightly alkaline, between 7.35 and 7.4. Your body will go to extraordinary lengths to protect this vital balance. However, the environment inside our trillions of individual cells can tell a very different story. When our daily choices, the foods we eat, the beverages we drink, are predominantly acid-forming, it puts a tremendous strain on our body's natural regulatory systems. Imagine this constant low-level internal stress. Over time, it can lead to a cellular environment that is highly acidic. According to Barbara O'Neill and a growing body of health research, a cellular pH of around 5.5 is where trouble begins. This acidic state is a breeding ground for harmful yeasts, fungi, and most alarmingly, cancer. As Barbara states so clearly, cancer loves 3 things: an acidic environment, a lack of oxygen, and a steady supply of sugar. Therefore, the strategy for building a body resilient to disease becomes clear. We must focus on creating a highly alkaline internal landscape, ensuring our cells are well oxygenated and drastically cutting down on the sugars that feed disease. The first and arguably one of the most impactful acid-forming food groups we need to discuss is meat. For generations, meat has been at the center of the dinner plate, often viewed as the primary source of strength and sustenance. However, modern science has begun to reveal the other side of this story. Foods like red meat and processed meats are particularly high in minerals such as phosphorus and chlorine. When our bodies metabolize these minerals, the byproduct is acid, which must be neutralized. This is why Dr. T. Colin Campbell's extensive research in the China study was so groundbreaking. He discovered he could essentially flip a switch on cancer cell growth in his laboratory animals simply by adjusting the amount of animal protein in their diet. When the animal protein was increased, cancer growth accelerated. When it was decreased, cancer growth slowed and even reversed. This powerful evidence suggests that a diet high in red and processed meats contributes significantly to the acidic load in our bodies, potentially fostering an environment where cancer cells can more easily develop and proliferate. Now let's turn our attention to a food that has become an almost unavoidable staple in the modern world: hybridized wheat. The bread that feels soft and fluffy, the pasta that cooks to a perfect al dente, and the pastries that melt in your mouth are all likely made from a form of wheat that is drastically different from what our ancestors consumed just a few generations ago. The ancient original wheat, known as einkorn, had a simple protein and gluten structure that was relatively easy for the human gut to digest. However, in the 1950s, in an effort to combat world hunger and increase crop yields, scientists engaged in intensive crossbreeding of the wheat plant. They succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, creating a hybridized wheat that produced 6 times more grain per acre. While this was a victory for food production, no safety studies were ever conducted on how this new, altered grain would affect human health. The hybridization process created a gluten-protein structure that is incredibly complex and robust. It's so tough, in fact, that it's almost as if you need a cast iron gut to break it down properly. This fundamental change is a primary driver behind the epidemic of gluten intolerance we see today, which manifests in frustrating and persistent symptoms like uncomfortable bloating and that all too common feeling of brain fog and mental fatigue. Next on our list are 2 cultural mainstays that often go hand in hand: caffeine and refined sugar. That morning cup of coffee, the afternoon tea, or the fizzy soda you might reach for can have a more significant impact than just a temporary energy boost. Caffeinated beverages have an acidifying effect on the body. To maintain its crucial pH balance, your body is forced to draw upon its own internal stores of alkaline minerals. Vital nutrients like calcium, potassium, and magnesium are pulled from your bones and tissues to buffer the acid. This can, over time, deplete your mineral reserves, leaving you more vulnerable to chronic diseases. The problem is massively compounded when sugar is introduced into the equation. On its own, Sugar has a neutral pH of 7. However, the metabolic process it undergoes in the body is highly acid-forming. It not only produces acidic byproducts like lactic acid, but also feeds acid-producing bacteria in your gut, altering your delicate gut microbiome. When you combine caffeine and sugar, as you find in a can of Coca-Cola, which has an extremely acidic pH of around 2.6, you are consuming a beverage that Barbara O'Neill bluntly calls a killer and toxic to the body. One of the more surprising foods on the list of acid formers is aged cheese. The sharp, complex flavors that we enjoy in cheeses like cheddar, Parmesan, or blue vein cheese are a result of aging and fermentation processes. In the case of blue cheese, that distinctive character comes from a type of mold. While fresh cheeses like cottage cheese or ricotta are closer to a neutral pH, the aging process makes most cheeses moderately to strongly acid-forming. Generally, dairy products fall into the acid-forming category because, similar to meat, they are high in protein and phosphorus, which increases the potential renal acid load on your kidneys. This means your kidneys must work in overdrive to neutralize and excrete the acidic waste products. It's important to remember that not every aspect of these foods is negative, but in the context of creating an alkaline environment, they contribute to the acid side of the equation. Lastly, while not technically foods, it is impossible to have this conversation without addressing the profound impact of alcohol and tobacco. These substances are among the most potent creators of an acidic internal environment. When alcohol is metabolized by the liver, it produces a toxic compound called acetaldehyde, a known neurotoxin which, as Barbara points out, is a brain killer. Both alcohol and tobacco place immense stress on the body's detoxification and buffering systems, forcing it to work incredibly hard to restore balance. Consistent use of these substances makes it nearly impossible to maintain the healthy, slightly alkaline internal state that is so crucial for long-term health and disease prevention. Upon reviewing this list, meat, wheat, caffeine, sugar, aged cheese, alcohol, it would be easy to feel overwhelmed. But the good news, and the central message of this philosophy, is that you do not have to achieve perfection to achieve vibrant health. The goal is not complete avoidance, but rather a conscious and intelligent balance. The principle to strive for is the 80-20 rule. Aim for approximately 80% of your daily food intake to come from the life-giving, nutrient-dense, alkaline-forming side of the spectrum. This includes a wonderful variety of fresh vegetables, leafy greens, lemons, limes, avocados, and certain fruits. The remaining 20% can then be composed of acid-forming foods, and it is important to distinguish that this 20% should ideally come from healthy, whole food sources. Nutritious items like most beans and legumes, excluding lentils and lima beans, a variety of nuts, excluding almonds and Brazil nuts, and other whole grains still have a slightly acidifying effect, but provide essential nutrients. By consciously shifting the balance on your plate, you move away from the highly processed, inflammatory foods and toward a diet that nourishes, supports, and builds a powerful, alkaline foundation for a long, healthy, and energetic life.